All right, well, I think we're ready to roll with our second speaker. I have you help me welcome Sanam Shirazi, who's presenting some work that is a collaboration between Simon Fraser and our friends here, our new, for some of you, new friends here in Edinburgh. So take it away.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sanam, and I have recently graduated as a master's student from Simon Fraser University, and I'm here today to present our research on the role of achievement goal orientations when studying the effect of learning analytics visualizations on behalf of my supervisors, Professor Marek Hatala and Professor Dragan Gašević, and my longtime friend, Srećko Joksimović, who is soon to be Dr. Srećko Joksimović. This is probably the largest crowd that I have ever presented to, so I hope you enjoy my presentations and I do a well job of that. For long, learning analytics tools have been focused on institutions to inform educators and administrators about students' engagement and academic achievement, and to support their decision making to guide students' learning process and maintain retention. But they also bring an opportunity to provide analytics and observe analytics from students' perspective and put them as a tool in the hands of the students to support their learning as self-regulated learners. One way of providing such a support is through learning analytics visualizations. Such visualizations intend to offer opportunities for support at various levels, starting from awareness, just letting students become aware of how they are doing, and providing an opportunity for them to reflect on what they see on the visualizations, and taking a step further to sense make from what they have interfered in the reflection process and answering those questions, and finally an actual impact, which is a change of behavior in their learning. In order to do that, learning analytics visualizations present trace data to students using the theories of information design about different things such as time spent on their activities, generated artifacts, user resources, and their social interactions in the online learning environment. And they have to be aligned with theories of education and instructional practices in order to be able to afford actual impact and to go all the way down to the timeline that I have showed up there. When we look at the existing studies around learning analytics visualizations, we see the influence of them on students' learning behavior and outcome and the overall population of the students. There are different methodologies used in this case. One of them is just self-assessment, where students report on the perceived usability and usefulness of the designs or learning analytics visualization designs that they are given to. And the drawback with that particular approach is that it depends on the judgment of the students, which might not necessarily be that accurate. Another way of doing that is conducting experiments in lab settings where there is not an actual context of the course and students are engaged in an activity that is particularly designed for that lab setting, which is an advancement from the usability and usefulness. Ultimately, what we would be interested in is to conduct such experiments in course settings, in an authentic course settings where students are using these tools over a longer period of time, and then we can evaluate what is the effect of that visualizations on their learning behavior. Also, research on educational psychology shows that individuals differ in their readiness to profit from a particular treatment in a particular context. This means that a particular treatment or intervention or tool that might be useful in a particular context for particular students might not necessarily work the same way for other students considering the individual differences. Our hypothesis was that this would be the case for learning analytics visualizations as well, and we know that there are theoretical constructs in educational psychology that can explain these individual differences. For example, epistemic beliefs, study approaches, goal orientation, or any other motivational construct This kind of formed our research goal, which was to conduct an empirical study in an authentic course setting to investigate the effect of different information presented through learning analytics visualizations on the learning behavior of students with individual differences. One of those theoretical constructs that we looked into was achievement goal orientation, which is a motivational construct that describes the purpose of engagement in an achievement behavior. In the latest model, achievement goal orientation is described in 2 dimensions. First, the definition of standards that students use to evaluate themselves, task, self, and other. And the valence, which describes whether students use those standards to approach success or avoid failure. For example, whether the student's goal is to do well on the task or avoid failing the task, or whether they intend to do better than they have done before or just avoid doing worse, or whether they strive to outperform their peers or avoid performing worse than them. We know that based on the educational psychology research that individuals differ in this aspect. And there's an instrument, a 3x2 instrument, where students can fill this and we can get a sense of their achievement goal orientation. This slide provides an overview of our study design. We wanted to study the effect of different information presented through learning analytics visualizations on students' learning behavior. We particularly selected online discussion activity as the learning activity because it provides an environment where students can interact with each other and to build knowledge collectively and individually, and also research shows that learning analytics provided in forms of reports and dashboards in this context is supportive of productive engagement for our students. In order to do that, we designed 3 different learning analytics visualizations, which I will be explaining later. And these were integrated into the discussion platform of a learning management system that we were using at SFU. And each student was randomly assigned to have access only to one of these visualizations. And then the learning behavior of the students was determined based on their posting behavior. So we looked at the quantity and the quality of their postings. And then we looked at the individual differences that students have, because that was the main goal of our study. And we used AGO instrument to analyze that and in a way connect the data that we are getting from the trace data from the learning management system in the discussion activity and the AGO. Instructional scaffolds were also provided to guide students' participation in discussion. For measuring the quality of the posting, we use Contmetric analysis, which is a computational linguistic facility. And for the statistical analysis of our research question, we use hierarchical linear mixed models. So now that I have shown the study design, it's easier to bring up the research questions and review them again. So our first research question was, is there an association between the visualization and the quantity of the messages posted by students when controlled for their self-reported achievement goal orientation? Secondly, we wanted to take that to the quality of the students' messages and look at the association between the information presented through the visualization that the student had access to after controlling for their self-reported achievement goal. In this study, we designed 3 different visualizations so that they could inform students on how they are doing in the discussion activity. Each visualization showed a different type of information, and we thought that we kind of designed it in a way that we thought could potentially align with different motivations underlying different achievement goals. By no means the contribution of our paper is around designing learning analytics visualizations that are like theoretically grounded, but it's more an initial step towards studies that would understand the relationship between individual differences and how students respond to the visualizations, and that could be an initial step towards getting how we can make informed design choices when it comes to learning analytics visualizations and individual differences. So the first visualization that we had designed was the class average, which lets the students compare their posting performance with the average number of messages posted by the rest of the class. And this is a typical way of presenting that's been used in many existing systems. And while there are benefits of using that, there are also literature shows that it can also have negative effects on the self-efficacy and things like that. But we mainly use this because it's commonly used by other systems. The second one shows the number of messages. It's called top contributors. Shows the number of messages posted by the students in comparison to the messages posted by the top individuals in the class who had the highest number of contributions. This visualization also allows top contributors to gain recognitions by showing their pictures and their names next to their contribution level. And in the third visualization, unlike the other two, we focused on the content of the messages rather than the quantity of the messages. And we looked into how many of the key concepts the student covered in their messages when they were posting. In order to do that, we measured quality using latent semantic analysis, a natural language processing technique that measures the coherence of the text. And we can see that the color coding shows different levels of coherence, where darker shades are more coherent on that on a message where a certain keyword was used. Those keywords were selected by the instructor of the course, and they were tied into the discussion topic that the students were using. For the field experiment, online discussion activity was designed and facilitated based on instructional guidelines in collaborative learning literature to support productive discussions. Students were asked to discuss in groups of 4 to 11 over a period of 7 to 14 days on a topic related to the course content that was presented as a form of an open-ended questionnaire, such as the one in this example. And there were guidelines provided for students on how to participate, for example, how to construct their individual messages, or what to focus on in their group message to make sure that higher levels of knowledge construction happen in the discussion. Also, role assignment was used as a scripting technique, and the marking criteria was clearly defined in terms of the quantity, content, and many other dimensions. This study was replicated over 6 discussions across 4 undergraduate courses that were offered in an interactive arts and technology program in spring and summer of 2015. The first table shows the number of participants assigned to each visualizations who filled in the questionnaires across all of the discussions and the courses. Submitting the questionnaires was voluntarily, so not all the students in the course were filling that out, but these are the selection of our participants, where we had 169 students participate in our study. Also, the use of the visualizations was voluntarily. We didn't force students to use it, which make us have a fewer number of students using the visualizations. So the second table focuses on a smaller subset of the participants that we call the visualization users, because they looked at the visualization more than once. And our logic was that if they go in for the second time, is that they have made a choice to go back to something that they already know what it is about, and it offers them some opportunity. We can see the median count of views for students or the visualization users in this table, and we can see that over that period of 7 to 14 days, it ranged anywhere from 5 to 7 times of view as a median. To measure the quality of the messages, we use Contmetrics, a computational linguistic facility that provides various measures of text characteristic. This slide provides a comparison between two sample messages in terms of the 5 principal components that we use in our study. We can see that the message 1 has more concrete words and less abstract words in comparison to message 2. Also, the syntactic structure used in message 1 is slightly more simple than message 2. When we look at the referential cohesion, we see that it is higher in message 2 because there are, in terms of at the textual level, we can see more semantic similarity between the sentences. And in terms of the deep mental cohesion level, again, the same thing with message 2. Message 2 is more narrative in style and less informational compared to message 1. We use hierarchical linear mixed models for statistical analysis of our research questions. A mixed model consists of a combination of fixed and random effect, and it is really there to evaluate the influence that fixed effects have on the outcome or the dependent variables after controlling for the random effects. So in this study, when we were talking about fixed effects, we looked at the interaction between visualization type and the scores of students on the 6 AGO scales. And in the case of our first research question, our dependent variable was the count of posts. For the random effect, we looked at students being part of a course or students being part of a discussion being part of a course. And why we use this particular method is the suitability to model data when you have hierarchies. When you have a student who is part of a discussion group, who is part of a discussion topic, and then that student is part of a course, and also when you have cross variables, such as this one where we have the interaction between visualization type and AGO scale scores. After reviewing a couple of our null models, which only includes the random effects, we came up with the random variable being student in a course because that was the best fitting model. But then we compared our null model with the fixed model that includes both the fixed effect and the random effect using several criteria like likelihood ratio test, AIC, and we can see that the fixed model is a better fit than the null model. And based on our score, we can see that it explains higher variance, which means that, yes, the effect of different visualization students' quality of post for when controlled for the AGOs was a better model than our null model. But we had to investigate it deeper, so we looked at the interaction effects between this AGO scales and all of the visualization types, and we look at what significant findings we have. This is particularly the significant findings for the count of posts, and we can see that the interaction between other approach and the visualization type had significant effect on the count of posts. In the case of class average, the direction of association between the class average and the count of posts was negative, which means that for students who use class average and had other approach scales, the higher levels of other approach was associated with lower levels of count of posts. And this was different for the other two groups of students who had top contributors and quality, which means while one worked best, the top contributors and quality worked best for other approach students, it did not necessarily work for the other. We repeated the same model for the quality of the post based on the Contmetrics 5 principal components. Again, our fixed effect was the interaction effect between visualization type and AGO scale scores, which were on independent and covariates, and the random effect student in a course. So we had 5 different models, one for each Contmetrics, and the results showed that in all of the cases, the fixed model had a significantly better fit than the null model. For the purpose of space, I didn't bring the results, but it's similar to tables such as this one where you can actually see the likelihood ratio test and AIC. So we wanted to study the effect of different visualizations on students' quality of post when controlled for their achievement goals. And we looked at the interaction effect between visualization type and AGO scale. So this table shows the statistically significant findings, only a portion of it, for the two comp metrics components, narrativity and deep cohesion, and the AGOs, these three AGO scales. I brought this here as an example just to show that the self-avoidance in interaction with quality had positive association with the quality of post in terms of narrativity and deep cohesion, while the same AGO scale in interaction with the other two visualizations had negative effect. And here is where we see the differences in terms of the individual differences. And when we look at the task avoidance, the result is completely different. In this case, the quality visualization in interaction with task avoidance had negative effect on both deep cohesion and narrativity of the messages posted by students. And this is very interesting because we know that, like, for self-avoidance, if we give them, based on this limited result, that if we give them the quality visualization, it might help them in terms of some quality aspects of their messages. And for example, having them have higher deep cohesion, which is ideally what you would want because it shows higher levels of knowledge construction. And this is the case that we struggle with because a lot of achievement goal orientations with negative valence, like all the avoidance goals, sometimes struggle with a lot of stresses, self-efficacy. So providing them a tool to be able to overcome some of those challenges could be really helpful. But we do also see similar results for approach goals, and I have brought task approach in this case, and you can see that again the result for this one is completely different from the other two. The study that we did confirms the potentials of learning analytics visualizations to afford impact on students' learning. We saw that students actually used the visualizations and it affected their posting behavior. Also, it confirmed a hypothesis in a sense that students with different individual differences reacted differently to these visualizations. Some of them had visualizations had positive effect on the students and some had negative depending on their individual differences. And in terms of implications for theory and practice, it highlights the significance of conducting empirical studies in authentic course settings to be able to evaluate the actual impact of the learning analytics visualizations on the students, and it also highlights the methodological importance of looking at the fine-grained data in combination with traditional self-reported tools. This brings us back to the idea of considering individual differences in designing learning analytics visualizations. Of course, a lot of more research and empirical studies are required to be able to provide a guideline on how we can potentially provide personalized learning analytics visualizations, but this would be a direction that we could potentially look into. We considered the learning analytics visualizations for discussion activity, but potentially we can have them extended to other activities as a future direction. And also we can consider individual differences with respect to other theoretical constructs such as study approaches. And we had a paper from our research lab in the workshop yesterday, LAL, which shared some preliminary results based on that. And we know that in this particular study, we use instructional scaffolds to guide students' participation in the discussion. And we know that that is helpful in terms of the knowledge construction, and it has positive effect, which brings us the question whether the instructional scaffolding that we used kind of fostered the positive association between engaging with visualization and learning behaviors. Finally, we would like to investigate the role of pedagogical intervention for leveraging learning analytics visualizations. They have to be provided into a framework where it can actually support the use of learning analytics. For example, how we can do goal settings and reflections on the analytics that was suggested by Alyssa Weiss. Finally, linking the motivational disposition in order to other individual traits such as attention, perception, processing, and evaluation, and discussion and argumentative writing, which could help better understand how these visualizations influence learning. Thank you.
Perfectly timed. Okay, so we have questions. We have plenty of time for questions. Give you a moment to think of one, and I'll start in the front if you're closest.
My question was just when reviewing what the students looked at the visualizations for the discussions, did you see if there was an increase or decrease in what they viewed during the discussion? So do they view visualizations more later on or earlier, or there was a difference?
We looked into that just slightly, not very much, to look at like different discussion sessions that they went into where there was a discussion activity involved and how much they used the visualizations. And so you could see like at the beginning there was a spike of students using it, getting less, and then towards the ends going up, which our assumption was perhaps closer to the due date of the activity, students will go in more, and at the beginning they're just interested to find out what the visualization offers. Yeah.
Going back here, had a question.
Yes. Hi. I wanted to ask you about the AGO. You said that it's now self-reported. Did you also consider ways to estimate it or to get it from the data?
I know that there are 1 or 2 papers that show how you can estimate achievement goal orientation based on the traces of data of how students have done. I don't know what stage exactly that is in, but I know that's the direction that a couple of papers were heading towards. I don't remember. I think it was it Sue? I can share that with you. I don't remember the name, but I can share that with you definitely.
Hello there. Ooh, right, yeah. Okay. I think it's interesting that you're talking about transparency of learning analytics solutions to students. And you've picked up on the point that using a sort of a class average or a cohort average or a module average is potentially demotivating. Do you think that it's a metric that we should hold back from giving to our students? Do you think it's a dangerous metric?
Thank you for the question. Based on the result that we see, initially our thought was that it would negatively impact in many cases, but on our preliminary result, we don't see that it negatively impacts in many cases. In some cases, here and there, depending on the individual differences, we can see that there are sometimes potentials of positive effect of even class average for some of the students. So the answer to that question, I don't think that we necessarily have to hold back onto that, but we have to be careful when, how, and who we represent it to. Generally, I think that when it comes to students with performance orientations, and that's like the scope that we were looking into, they tend to either be very motivated to use that or so disengaged. With other types of the visualizations, it's kind of in between, and that's like how I see it.
Someone else? More questions?
So are you thinking longer term that a system might automatically choose which kind of visualization for particular students, or that students would choose their own based on your presenting some of these results?
I would say that especially looking at a complex construct like this one, if we had to give this choice to the students to choose based on their goal orientation, it might have been hard for them to actually assess that particular measure. So what we envision and we are hoping to get there is to be able to have the system automatically choose that for you. And that could be like an adaptive system that initially considers a couple of factors and it changes or evolves over time. I'm sure that there are still good ways of giving this opportunity to students, but then it wouldn't be so much based on the theories of educational psychology, or that's probably how I see it. Yeah.
So I have a question. You mentioned to the other question about for students who have a performance orientation, but I know the other part of the scale is students who have a mastery orientation. So was that also considered along with your goal orientation?
Yeah, so the initial, like the 2x2 model of achievement goals considers mastery versus performance, and then it's broken down to 3x2, which is mastery is kind of mapped into the task approach and avoidance now. And with that, then we also see similar, like we see findings significant and both insignificant, and we also see differences. Like for instance, we would expect that the quality visualization would always work for that type of students, and we do see that that is helpful, but we also see that top contributors also contributor to having them have higher narrativity, for instance.
Great, thank you. I think we need to change speakers, but while we're doing that, we could do one more question. Or not. No? Okay, well, we'll take a little break here. Thank you.